All right, folks. Let's do this. John, no one's willing to sit with you? No. That's just a shame. No? That's not. All right, meeting of the Faculty Senate will come to order. Welcome, everyone. If you've not already done so, please check in with your mobile ID so you get credit for attendance. If you're having difficulty, check in with the desk or Judy up here afterward. From our colleagues connecting from a distance, please begin your responses with Potomac State or WVU Tech. Potomac State, how many do we have present today?
Sir, Potomac State has 2 present.
Thank you much, Lee. And WVU Tech, how many are present?
We have 2. Do you hear us?
Yes, sir, we hear you. Okay, so we have a quorum, so we're up and moving. All right. For approval, minutes of the January 14th Faculty Senate meeting. The minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed as an annex to your agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to the meetings from the January meeting? Okay, hearing no corrections, the minutes are approved as written. All right, we do not have a report from President Gee today. He's down in Charleston, and I believe he's in D.C., okay. And Provost McConnell is also absent, although in her stead we have John Campbell.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon, everybody. I send apologies from President Gee and Provost McConnell. President Gee is in D.C. For a previously scheduled arrangement, and Provost McConnell is down at Charleston giving testimony to the open discussions around campus carry, and felt that that was necessary to be there and be present. So I have several updates that Joyce asked me to give, and then I'll dive into a few other items. In terms of our work with the Energy Institute and energy research, James Wood, the interim director of the Energy Institute, was part of the panel with the U.S. Energy Innovation before the U.S. Senate Committee. In his testimony, he outlined several research projects that we have going on at WVU, including improving coal-fired powered generation and the advanced storage and production of natural gas. Fanny Yee, an assistant professor in computer science and electrical engineering, was recently awarded a $1 million grant to help develop artificial intelligence techniques for combating global opioid trafficking. Dr. Yee's research has been supported by the the National Institute of Justice, and it's one of the largest that the National Institute of Justice actually awards, so it's very good to see that. In terms of some other things that have occurred since the last Senate meeting, our online programs have received very high rankings in the latest U.S. News and World Report issue. Data analytics, forensics accounting, fraud examination, and our online MBA have been outlined, as well as our graduate engineering program in information technology. The graduate program in education was also ranked in the top 100. Tomorrow, we have a deadline for nominations for a new Graduate Research Mentor Award. And so if you haven't seen that in e-news, we'll have 4 finalists will be selected, with one of the 4 being awarded $5,000. So if you have some nominations, please get that in by the end of the day tomorrow. Several big issues that are going on. So the board on Friday approved the new no smoking, no vaping policy. And so now the efforts actually shift from, the revisions to the policy to working on enforcement, communications, and education. That we know was a issue that we didn't quite have nailed down with the last version of the smoking policy. So we do have a group working on that quite actively and trying to figure out how we can get that and promote that. The university has decided to withdraw from the academic common market. This allows students in certain programs from certain states to come to WVU and receive in-state tuition. Upon evaluating the program, we decided to pull out for several different reasons. One, we thought we could use the money that we're spending on that program to go after and attract a higher caliber student. Sometimes our ACM students are ones that were unable to get into their institution at their home state and come over here, and so we've seen a number of those being of lesser academic quality. The other is around the bureaucracy of the program. And so when students use the ACM, they have to actually apply to their state. Sometimes the turnaround back to WVU is measured in terms of months. And if students change a major, in some states you actually have to go back and reapply, even if they're in the ACM. And that seems like a set of steps that, in today's world is unnecessary. We're also seeing a number of big institutions withdrawing from the consortium for the same reasons. So we've decided to kind of move that. It's roughly about $2.8 million that we spend right now on the academic common market students. And we're going to apply that to other merit-based programs, and it'll be directed actually towards all majors, where right now ACM is towards a limited set of majors. Finally, around the issue of campus carry, I made a comment that Joyce is down in Charleston. There's an open public forum that began at 2 o'clock. It is still going on as we speak, although originally it was supposed to end after an hour. We have down in the State House not only Provost McConnell, our police chief, WP, we have both the president and vice president of student government, as well as Stan Heilman, who is part of our board of governors and one of our faculty members, in addition to other people from the legislative staff. The discussions, much like around the last 4 years that this has been occurring, it continues to come up. People have asked, okay, so what has changed this year? Last year, this legislation pretty much went to a grinding halt with the teacher strike. This year, everything seems to be aligned to get this introduced into committee and to get it to a Senate or a House and Senate vote. And compared to last year, there's already been some changes to the legislation. Campus carry would be banned in areas where student misconduct and disciplinary hearings are occurring, in nursery and daycare facilities, in venues of greater than 1,000 people, and facilities leased to another organization, and think hospital in our case. We still are actively working and opposing the legislation, but are also realistic and trying to make sure that if it does move forward, how do we actually make the best of this, and how do we include the most important exemptions in this? There are a couple of obvious things that are not part of the current legislation that we have concerns of. One is around laboratories. We've had a number of people express concerns that if there was an accidental discharge in one of our laboratories, what that would do. The other is around our residence hall rooms. And right now, neither of those are included in the current legislation. We are going to be holding a couple of campus conversations around this topic as we learn more as the day concludes. The first one will be Thursday at 1:30 p.m. in the Mountain Lair in the ballrooms. The second will be at 10 a.m. on Friday at the law school in the big auditorium there. And we'll be able to answer your questions, plus provide you all the updates that we know at the time. The public hearing is today. As of 20 minutes ago, it hasn't been scheduled to hit committee yet, but we expect that to occur probably by the end of the week. So that's where we stand with that. So with that, I'll leave it open to questions. Questions from Potomac State or Tech?
No questions, sir, but thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay. We are scheduled on the agenda to discuss and hopefully pass a letter from the Faculty Senate that opposes campus carry. It makes sense to me to amend the agenda to change that, to bring that forward now, given what we just did. So unless I hear objections, I'm going to move to that, and I'll do my remarks, and we'll continue with the rest of the agenda after that. I was asked by WVU's Governmental Relations Office to review and revise the letter that the Senate put out last year when the legislature thought about this issue again before. This issue is not, I don't think, unanimous among the faculty, and that's why last year's letter focused on the issues of costs and asked the legislature to focus on those issues rather than take a clear position against it. The letter this year, which is an appendix in the agenda today, also sort of continues that trend and expands the overall argument that the cost of implementing campus carry, even with the restrictions we've asked for, will be high. And the legislature, we would ask them to consider that as they move forward and debate the pros and cons of campus carry. So given that I was trying to craft something that could win the support of the broadest set of faculty, all the letter does is point to the costs and argue that that's something that and thus we probably shouldn't go down that path. So if anyone wants to add some comments or wordsmith some part of the document or anything else like that, I'm happy to take suggestions at this point. Again, John Campbell's here. We have somebody from University Relations who's also here to sort of speak to this if there are any faculty questions. I can read the letter briefly, just for those folks who don't have a copy of it in front of you. It's not very long. Be it resolved by the Faculty Senate of West Virginia University that the Legislature of West Virginia is hereby requested to consider the full potential impact of campus carry on the faculty, staff, students, visitors, and communities around our campuses. Specifically, we are concerned about the impact of A, the public health and safety issues for students, faculty, staff, and visitors associated with the increased access to firearms in a densely populated environment like a university or a college campus. B, the harm to recruiting and retention of both students and faculty. Many students and faculty and potential faculty come from other parts of the country that do not have the same outdoor and hunting culture that is local to us here. C, the cost of compliance, as colleges and universities will need to spend additional monies to ensure that students, faculty, staff, and visitors are in compliance with the legislation. Should the West Virginia University Legislature consider such legislation, we would ask that issues such as the ones above be strongly considered and influence the legislature's decision. So that's an iteration of the one we added last year. It broke down the arguments into a couple of different points of view. But at this point, if there's any comments, I would like to move that this be, have a resolution that this be adopted as the language, and then I would forward it on as appropriate to the bodies that be down in Charleston. Comments?
Okay, well, if there's no comments, I will move that we adopt the resolution contained in Annex 8.
I have a second. Are there any questions or points of discussion for the motion? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Potomac State, how do you vote?
Potomac State says 2 ayes, sir.
Thank you. And WVU Tech, how do you vote?
2 ayes, sir.
Thank you. Okay, so the motion is passed, and I will get together with the appropriate folks and have the letter distributed down in Charleston as necessary. Okay, thank you for that. We'll go back to the agenda that we had in place beforehand. All right, so report from me, and then we'll move off to the business here. Okay, so first off, I should note that we'll do another working group session. So we did a working group session, broke us out in these tables like this last time in December. I'm moving to do another one of those at the March meeting, March 4th meeting, so the next Senate meeting in 3 weeks. The focus here is going to be on what does a healthy and/or successful department look like. I think we're all aware of the larger national trends, that fewer students are likely to be going to college, that West Virginia has a population problem in the sense that we're losing folks here and thus likely to lose college-educated or college-age students coming to WVU. And of course, there's been budgetary issues surrounding the state government in the last few years as well. All of that, I think, argues for some financial pressures, not now, but at some point probably down the road here, not only again at WVU, but other places as well. And I very much want the faculty to have their own view and their own voice about what should be the metrics and what could be the metrics for evaluating departments, hopefully proactively, so they can think about fixing themselves ahead of time and get help to fix themselves ahead of time versus a worst case scenario where we have to think about other issues as well. So I have some national metrics for departmental productivity, and at least as I've envisioned the working session in 3 weeks, we'll distribute those national metrics and have a brief conversation about what they are and what they look like. And then to try to make this hopefully a little bit more interesting, we're going to present some scenarios of actual fictitious departments. Nobody get worried, real, honestly, fictitious departments based on those metrics, and have each of the tables kind of work through, given the information you have in front of you, is this a department that looks like it's in trouble, or is this not a department that looks like it's in trouble? And so again, this gives you a chance to think about how those metrics would be used, how you would measure them, whether the measures are any good, what additional information you would like beyond the national metrics in order to evaluate a department or not, so that we can start to collect data around those metrics and other things like that. So the working groups would come together and then at the end could actually discuss what the departments, what these fictitious departments might do to improve themselves, reinvent themselves, different packaging, merge, infusion of resources. In other words, the goal here is to have the faculty think about departmental activities and actions, think about overall departmental success and difficulties, and come to some conclusions about how we might measure those things. And again, I'll reiterate, there are no problems right now. None are anticipated in the future. There's not hair on fire situations or anything like that. But just an exercise that lets us, the faculty, have a voice on what we might think about, or at least potentially think about, for departments getting in trouble and other things like that. A note, one of the comments that came up from several participants in the last session was that senators didn't mix up as much as they could, and so the tables tended to clump together by folks in different places. So we're probably going to have a bit more of a randomized seating arrangement next time. So please check in as you come in next time. You won't necessarily have to check in like for attendance, but we're going to try to mix the seating up. Yes, I know we're all kindergartners here, right? We're going to try to mix the seating up a little bit more so we break up the groups and have them be a little bit more diverse. Note, by the way, that the responses, we sent out a poll based on the working group in December, and you folks filled the poll in and also gave us some responses. All of that is now posted as Annex 1A off the agenda, so if you want to read through the responses that we got from that and see what people liked and didn't like, please feel free to do that. And again, if you have any questions, comments, issues, anything related to that, related to working groups or the past thing, please let me know, come talk to me or send me email or something else like that. We've done campus carry, so I can skip over that. I will note we're already preparing for Senate for the next academic year. So you should all have seen a general email to faculty asking for nominations for folks to serve terms in the Senate. Those nominations have closed, and the election ballots should go out roughly the end of the month and be open to roughly March 8th when WVU spring break begins. Nominations for Faculty Senate Chair-elect, who will succeed Emily Murphy, are open and will remain open through the end of the March Senate meeting. And then at the April meeting, all those who are nominated and accept the nomination will speak, and voting will happen at the April meeting to determine the next chair-elect. Note that this election for chair-elect is for a non-Board of Governors Senate chair, so it's the equivalent of me. Emily and Matt served on the Board of Governors, or will serve on the Board of Governors. The alternate years do not serve on the Board of Governors, if that makes a difference to anybody in terms of whether they choose to run or think about running. Lastly, I'll note that senators should be getting a survey relatively soon to let senators volunteer for committee assignments for, again, the next academic year, the 1920 academic year. I would strongly encourage senators to work on committees. That's where the bulk of the work of the Senate gets done. A lot of the important work of curricular issues and GEF issues and other kinds of issues are done in the committees, and I would strongly recommend that you folks take a turn serving on the committees. It's where a lot of the, as I said, the important and interesting work is done. Next up, I'll note, back in late December, I was approached by a faculty member who had found some offensive comments on their ESEIs by students as part of the student evaluation of instruction. They wanted some form of redress in fixing this off of the SEIs or something in that sense. They also actually wanted the students prosecuted for violations of campus codes. After discussing the issue in several venues, it's clear this problem has existed for a number of faculty members for some time. So in order to find some sort of consistent policy that might be applied to these kinds of issues, I've referred this to the Teaching and Assessment Committee to sort of work on and think through the legal, policy, Title IX, and assessment issues related to this and try to balance all that out. It's not clear where that one's going to go. The present chair of Teaching Assessment, Ashley Martucci, hasn't sort of beaten me to death yet for dropping this in her lap. So they're chewing this through and will eventually come back to Senate and some other places with a policy suggestion as to what might look like a policy with this area. Again, if anyone has any comments or anything else that they want to give to me or give to Ashley, please let us know. We're more than happy to take faculty interest in this. And again, we're not trying to ram a policy through. We're trying to come up with a reasonable policy, including looking at what other institutions are doing. So we're starting to look at best practices in other places to try to figure out how other folks have approached these things as well. So updates to follow on that one. Okay, that's it for my comments here. Any questions for me of any kind? Okay, we'll keep moving on then. All right, Ed, Curriculum Committee report.
Good afternoon. I have here for your approval Annexes 1, 2, and 3. Annex 1 is a set of new courses. Annex 2 is a set of courses that have been changed, and Annex 3 is a report on capstone course.
Okay, so we have a set of for approval items, and I'll combine them all into a single votable measure. So, Annexes 1 through 3 and some new programs. Are there any questions or points of discussion for any of the votable items? Okay, those in favor of approving Annexes 1 through 3 and the new programs say aye. Those opposed say no. Potomac State, how do you vote?
Potomac State has 2 ayes, sir.
Thank you. WVU Tech, how do you vote?
WVU Tech, 2 ayes.
Thank you, sir. Ayes have it. Annexes 1 through 3 and the new programs are approved. We also have one for information item. Ed.
Yeah, we also have the changes from the area of emphasis to the major. We shouldn't do that. So changes to the major in applied and environmental microbiology. Can we do all 3 also as a pack?
We've already done them.
Oh, that was part of the...
Yeah.
Sorry. So there is also
Okay.
an item for information, the new minor in finance. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, does anyone have any questions or points of discussion for the new minor in finance? Okay, not a votable item, so that is filed. Thank you.
That's about it.
Next up, a General Education Foundation Committee report from Robert Brock.
I just have Annex 4, which is for information only. It's just a transitional course from the GEC to GEF.
Okay, pretty simple. Anyone have any questions or points of discussion for the transition report? Okay, no vote is needed, so that is the GEF transition report is filed. Thank you, sir. Next up, a Teaching and Assessment Committee report from Ashley Martucci.
She's so excited. She wanted to come up too. I have for your approval the course grade rollover into digital measures.
Okay, so this is a document that's been sort of roaming through exec for a while, basically as a result of the Board of Governors policy that makes midterm grades a requirement for 16-week semester courses. We are now, as a policy, moving the percentage of grades that faculty give at mid-semester as a reportable measure in digital measures. So it will be automatically put into your digital measures. The underlying reasoning for this is that actually that information is already available to deans and chairs, and by putting it in digital measures, faculty themselves will be able to see what deans and chairs are seeing as well. So this is a movement for transparency, if you want to think of it that way, so everyone sees the same things. Nonetheless, we're bringing it here for a vote. All this has been through various other committees on other things as well. Does anyone have any questions or points of discussion for the mid-semester grade, recording mid-semester grades in digital measures? Okay, all those in favor of approving Annex 5, please say aye. Those opposed say no. Potomac State, how do you vote?
Potomac State has 2 ayes.
Thank you. WVU Tech, how do you vote?
WVU Tech, 2 ayes.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so the ayes have it. Annex 5 is approved. Next up, Carolyn Adkins, Committee on Committees, Membership, and Constituencies.
Yes, frequently throughout the year, we have people who have to roll off of committees and then we have to reappoint. So Annex 6 is we're moving approval of these 4 individuals to these committees.
Okay, so some small changes to committees. Are there any questions or points of discussion for Annex 6? All right, all those in favor of approving Annex 6, please say aye. Those opposed say no. Potomac State, how do you vote?
2 ayes, sir.
Thank you. WVU Tech, how do you vote?
Also 2 ayes.
Thank you, sir. Ayes have it. Annex 6 is approved.
And Annex 6A is just for information. We realize that throughout the years, we've kind of dropped the ball as far as letting the Senate know how we reappoint members when somebody rolls off. So we are going to put this information on the Senate site. Basically, if you are chairing a committee and somebody has to leave your committee, just contact the Committee on Committees chair or contact Judy Hamilton, and we will go back, number 1, to our survey that people filled out initially to see who was interested in serving on it, and then of course we take recommendations from committee chairs also. The other thing we wanted to do was to, under the committee charge, it was similar to what we have in the Constitution, but not exactly, so we decided just to replace it with the wording from the Constitution. So it's not a constitutional change, it's just changing the charge on the Senate website. Any questions?
Thank you, Carolyn. Good job. So again, that's not a votable item. That's for information. Unless there are any questions or points of discussion, we're just going to file that. Okay. Next up is a Faculty Welfare Committee report from Scott Wayne.
All right. Hello. Scott Wayne from Statler College, Chair of the Faculty Welfare Committee. We were asked to give a report on BOG Rule 1.6. That rule addresses discrimination, harassment, sexual misconduct, domestic misconduct, stalking, retaliation, and relationships. And in particular, we were asked to look at the section of that rule that addresses relationships between faculty and staff and students. Apparently there was a suggestion from one of the members of the Board of Governors that the rule perhaps should be made more rigorous or more strict. So we took a look at the existing rule. The rule is in force in its current form. It's not a new rule. So we took a look at that section. We also compared our rule to our peer institutions in the Big 12. And based on that comparison, we're pretty rigorous and pretty restrictive with the way our rule was stated. So the sections that we were asked to take a look at was Section 4 of the rule. So in that section, Section 4.2 is relationships involving students. and that states that faculty, staff, or members of the university community are prohibited from attempting to initiate, pursue, or engage in a relationship, consensual or non-consensual, with a student whom the individual evaluates, supervises, instructs, or otherwise has authority or control over. So we looked at that wording, and we believe that wording is sufficient because it targets the relationships that matter, relationships where there is a position of power over the student. The other part of that section, we noticed that there is no statement that says what could occur or what actions would be taken if a faculty member or staff member fails to comply with that provision. So one recommendation we make is that a statement should be added to that section that explains the consequences and what actions could be taken in the event of a violation of that provision. The second part of that section involves pre-existing relationships involving students, and those relationships are not outright prohibited in our rule, but the staff member or faculty member would be required to notify his or her supervisor that a pre-existing relationship existed. The supervisor would then notify talent and culture if it's a relationship that involves a staff member, or the provost's office if it's a relationship that involves a faculty member. And then, so we don't have any changes to that section. I'll note that there is a statement of what can occur in the event that a faculty member fails to report a relationship to their supervisor. And it says in that section, failing to disclose a pre-existing consensual relationship with students or not complying with the arrangements that have been made is prohibited and may result in disciplinary action up to and including termination. So our recommendation in the previous section is a statement similar to that should be added to the earlier section. We also looked at some of the procedures for filing a complaint. The rule doesn't specifically define the procedures for filing complaint, the investigation procedures, and any disciplinary procedures that might be taken, although it does point to some reference documents on some of our web pages. So if it's a student being accused of violation of some provision of this rule, it links to the Office of Student Conduct. If it's an employee, it would be the Title IX office that handles the complaint. And I did look on that web page. There is a procedure there. It's not very easy to find. So we would recommend that that procedure be made a little bit more apparent on the web page. And then the link actually to that disciplinary procedure is broken, so that would need to be corrected. And that's my report on BOG Rule 1.6. If anybody has any questions, any comments?
So to summarize, relationships between faculty and students, staff and students, are not prohibited unless there is a direct relation, a direct sort of supervisor-subordinate relationship between them. And if one then occurs, you then have to report that up the chain of command.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions or comments? As noted, the Board of Governors was thinking about changing this. This is our opportunity to essentially opine to the Board of Governors whether a change should be made or not. People okay with this? Microphone, so other campuses can't hear you.
Do we know what they're thinking about changing in the rule?
So my understanding is that from the Board of Governors, they were thinking about a more restrictive rule that would essentially ban all relationships between faculty and staff and then students.
No questions really, but I wonder if the impetus for this comes from University of Michigan. You may have read in the Chronicle of Higher Education, they recently have had a similar rule passed, and I'm wondering if just lots of Board of Governors and Board of Regents are now reconsidering policies. You know, if one person moves, then I think the rest start to move a little bit. I didn't know if we had any indication on that, or...
Matt, you serve on the Board of Governors. Do you want to speak to why the impetus for this?
I have no strong opinion on this, by the way.
Okay.
Thanks.
He said that Scott covered it well enough, and there was no reason to engage further. Anything else? Okay. I'll probably get together with you, Scott. We'll write a report up, and then we'll send it to the board of governors. Okay, thank you. All right, next up is just a for information item, a proposal to establish a Faculty Senate Inclusion and Diversity Committee. So some background on this, I was approached by a senator and some faculty back in the early part of the academic year asking why the Senate does not have a committee to think through diversity and inclusion issues. In addition, the kerfuffle, if you remember, over the Festival of Ideas and the lack of a clear body in the Senate to kind of take point to ask questions about that gave additional emphasis to the idea of forming some sort of committee related to issues of diversity, community, inclusion, and others. Finally, I know that there are faculty that would like some assistance with dealing with some of those issues in their classroom, whether they're having problems or at least would like to be able to talk about them in the context of the classroom. And those sorts of curricular issues don't really fit into the purview of the established committees that deal with curriculum, TACO and Curriculum Committee and GEF. So this is a shot across the bow. I've moved forward to propose that we establish a new standing committee that would tackle these kinds of issues. I've put a proposed committee charge in front of you as an annex. So the timeline is that, again, I'm happy to take comments and suggestions and let people talk to me either here or on email or in other places. But assuming there's a general idea that this sounds like a good idea, I will formally propose this charge and any amendments that come from it at the next executive committee, and then it will move to a vote at the following Senate committee, which would then establish it as a standing committee to be populated and exist for the next academic year and into the future. So I basically just wanted to put this out in front of you so you could think about it and get some reactions to it. Again, there's no vote today. This is not a formal movement to establish that. Again, I just wanted to sort of get this in front of you for information. So if anyone would like to make comments at this point, you're welcome to. Again, I'm happy to take them privately, publicly, send them an email, come find me, anything of that sort. Again, this is just sort of a shot across the bow to let people know that I'm moving in this direction. Okay. Next up, faculty report to state government by Roy Nutter.
Roy Nutter, Statler College, and your ACF rep. A number of things been going on, and I'm sure you've followed some of them. On January 28th, the ACF as a group set up about half a dozen meetings with our legislative representatives and senators. We successfully met with 2 of the 6. It happened to be the day the omnibus bill went up before everyone, so as they said last year, it began to suck the air out of the Capitol at that point. We did meet with Eric Householder, Chair of the House Finance, and Paul Espinoza, House Majority Whip. On February the 8th, there was a real ACF meeting and a number of things that you might be interested in. One of them was there is a group of students led by a Marshall student who are looking at reduced student costs. They are putting together a committee of students and faculty to look at how to reduce student costs, and I think mostly they're looking at making sure that we're not using books that are $500 a piece and that we try and use some of the online resources. They're looking for a faculty member to join that committee. If any of you would like to volunteer, I'll be happy to put your name forward. Let's see. I guess the third thing of importance is probably the bills before the legislature at the moment. WVU's done a pretty good job if you've been reading the WVU news. I think that's fairly indicative of what's happening. The loudest one at the moment for us is Senate Bill 2519, Campus Carry, and you've read, and WVU has published a lot about that. If you need contact information for your legislators, let me know. I've got a list for the Judiciary Committee, which is currently where that bill will apparently be introduced. I don't think it's been actually taken up by the committee yet. Senate Bill 386, the PEIA bill, seems to be just sitting there. Not sure what's happening, but my guess is that it's probably waiting on budget time before that thing begins to float. I don't see any movement with that. Senate Bill 451 is the omnibus education bill. Passed education has been sent to finance. Senate Bill 1, the community college bill, has passed the Senate and been sent to House Education. That's the one I think that has the free community college tuition as part of it. And there was some discussion in ACF about that. The four-year schools are worried that if everybody goes to community college, they're not going to get any freshmen. They'll all go to a two-year school. My reading of the bill doesn't say that at all. It looks like it's targeted toward certificates and two-year degrees that, I don't want to call them terminal, that sounds terrible, but two-year programs that lead to an electrician's license or heating air conditioning license. Probably not our students anyway. I've heard President Gee describe it as one that he favors a lot, and I think he's right, that in the long term, that bill will probably help West Virginia by putting more students in a school after high school. I don't think it's going to have much effect on WVU, and if it does, it'll probably be just the first year or so. Blue Ribbon Committee, John, I'm hearing nothing. Would you like to, I should have asked you why you were standing up there. John is going to give his report on the Blue Ribbon.
Oh, okay.
Right here or up there, take your pick.
Wherever you go.
And then I'm done.
Is that how to make you done faster? I just have to come up? Boy, I could
say something.
I could be everybody's friend. So Blue Ribbon Commission, so the commission is done with their work. A bill has been written but has yet to be introduced into committee. So we're kind of in the pause, the holding category right now. So stay tuned, more coming.
Okay. Anyone have any questions about anything relating to legislative issues in the midst of the session? Okay. Next up would be a Board of Governors report from Stan Heilman, but Stan's down speaking at the Campus Carry discussion, and so Matt Valente will give it.
Okay, so yes, as both Dave and John Campbell mentioned, Stan is down at the Capitol. He went down there with Joyce McConnell to participate in the Campus Carry open session. And I wanted to answer Nick Bellman's question more directly. So it was about the relationship policy. So we actually already passed the relationship policy about a year ago, so it's fairly new. Since it was passed, we had some other conversations, most notably on background checks, and some other conversations that occurred within the Board of Governors. And a very small fraction of the Board of Governors thought, well, maybe we need to go back to the policy we passed last year just to make sure that it's still appropriate. And I think Scott and the Welfare Committee did a good job of looking at that. So moving on, we had a board meeting last week, Friday, Thursday, committee meetings on Thursday. And as John Campbell mentioned, we passed some rules. We passed the rules on ethics, conflicts, and consulting, which is Rule 1.4, and the rule on tobacco and smoke-free campus, which is 5.6, and rule on information technology, 1.11 or 1.11. Now, the ethics rule, we got a lot of comments. We actually got about 50 comments. I want to personally thank you because you may recall I sent an email asking for comments, and they're all actually quite good. The administration and legal took them very seriously. In my opinion, they've all been incorporated, and the policy is much stronger than it was before. I'll give you one example. It wasn't clear if you were to go to, let's say, an NSF review panel and they pay you to participate, if that was considered consulting and if you needed permission to do that. Or another example is you're invited to speak at another university and they give you an honorarium. Is that consulting? Do you have to get that authorized or not? Well, the way the rule ended up being written in the end is it says that if the activity is within your job duties, so if it's an ordinary part of your job duties, if it's something, for instance, that would be taken into account in your annual evaluation, then you're allowed to do it and it would not be considered consulting. So those two examples I gave you would not be considered consulting, assuming that it's part of your job duties. Okay. The tobacco rule got a similar number of comments, about 50. However, they were all either strongly in support of the policy or kind of cynical about the potential to enforce it. But there's nothing in the comments that gave us any reason to change the policy. So the policy was actually passed as it was written prior to when it went out for comment. Okay, now, in addition to those rules being passed, there were two other policies that were on the agenda that I wanted to call to your attention. One is policy 5.9 on procurement and purchasing. This one is now in the public comment period, and so if you do purchasing or procurement or just have an interest in it, please look at the policy and make comments. I think Stan and I probably didn't really feel qualified to make comments because neither of us do a whole lot of purchasing. There was another policy on travel, and as you know from my few absences, I personally do a lot of travel, and so I took this seriously. It was on the agenda, and both Stan and I had a lot of objections, and it was not put out for comment. And this is something you need to have on your radar. There are a few things in there that would be major changes to the way we handle travel, one of which is, at least as it was written in the draft, all travel would have to be on P-card, so any travel expense, so this would be making reservations for airfare, for your hotel, and for your rental car, would have to be done on a P-card. Even if you have a rental car and you go to a gas station and you get gas, that would have to be on your P-card as well. The only exceptions is things that would be covered by a flat rate, which would be meals that are already covered by your per diem, or personal fuel for your vehicle, which would be covered by the mileage, okay? So that's the way it was written. I think we probably want to, I'm not sure if the administration really fully thought about the consequences of arming everyone with a P-card. I'm not sure if they really want that, okay? Another thing is there is a travel system. It's called My Travel. That's our travel management system. All reservations would have to be done through the travel management system with very few exceptions. I think the one common exception is if you're going to a conference, you could stay in the conference hotel and go through, but otherwise, your flights and your hotels and everything would have to be through the travel management system, even if it costs more. So it kind of reminds me of a little bit of, I've been here long enough, national travel, remember those days? Yeah. And we got away from that, but now we have to be careful not to go back. Now, the system is fairly good if you haven't tried it yet. I would actually encourage you to at least go there and try it, but I don't know if we want to be in a situation where we have to use it, okay? And then looking forward, there are only two more meetings this season. One is April 12th and one is June 21st. We're actually going to have the June 21st meeting at the Bechtel Summit, home of the Boy Scout Jamboree. And as you know, that's located halfway between the Gorge and Beckley. That's the June 21st meeting. The faculty presentation that we normally give is scheduled for that meeting, June 21st. We might move it to the April 12th meeting just to have more local participation. The staff and the students are going to be giving their presentations at April 12th, so we might do it then as well, unless we want to go down to Bechtel Summit. Okay, that's all I have in case unless there's any questions.
I just want to follow briefly that policy about the P card and the travel is not out. In other words,
it's not out. So it was pulled. I think it went through. It got to the board without any faculty input. So It was pulled, and I think we're going to meet with, I think it came from the finance people, so we'll meet with them. And hopefully some of these things can be changed.
And if you need faculty input on that, they might want to send it over here for comment or something like that.
That might be a good idea. Okay.
Okay, we amended the agenda to move the campus carry to previously, so that's done. So now we're down to new business. Is there any new business? Good. Adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All right. Thank you, folks. See you in 3 weeks.